exploration of North America. And we're going to keep also talking about our explorer that we talked about recently, Christopher Columbus. Now, before we start with our read aloud, there's a couple things we want to talk about. Number one, when Christopher Columbus was coming over, and again, this does mention it in some of our read alouds, but when he's coming over, there are already people living there. And those are why we talked about the Native American tribes before we talked about this, is because before Christopher Columbus came there, people were already living there. And we learned about a lot of these tribes. So when he says that he's discovering these new places, they're finding these new places, yes, they're new to him, but there are tribes that have been there for a very long time. And so he did not actually discover North America. He was just discovering it for European countries who had never seen it before. So I want you guys to keep that in mind. Now, the second thing we need to talk about before we start with our read aloud is the word conquistador. Now, this conquistador is a Spanish word, and it really means conquerors. So they were travelers and soldiers who were exploring for Spain and who traveled to North, Central, and South America to look for wealth, so money, land, everything, to conquer native people and gain control of the land. So these conquistadors who are coming over are actually people who know about the native tribes who are there. So this is people who are coming after Columbus had already made his first voyage and came back and told all about it. So they had very different motives, but again, most of it is going to boil down to the fact that they wanted money, they wanted land, and they wanted power. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So, without any further ado, here is our read aloud. Christopher Columbus made 4 voyages to the West Indies, convinced that he had reached the East Indies in Asia. The voyage most people knew about was the first one, the voyage when Columbus landed in the West Indies. In some ways, Columbus's second voyage was even more important. If you want to understand what happened in the Americas with European exploration over the following 100 years or so after Columbus, it helps to know something about his second voyage. When Columbus returned to Europe after his first transatlantic voyage, and so transatlantic, guys, that word trans means across, and Atlantic, is what you remember from social studies at the beginning of the year, means the Atlantic Ocean. So when he says transatlantic, that just means across the Atlantic Ocean. So he actually, when he returned home, he was greeted as a hero. Words of his expedition spread rapidly in Spain and throughout Europe. The reports he sent to King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella of Spain was printed in large quantities or amounts, using the recent invention of the printing press. So again, guys, before this was created, they didn't have printers they could just press print on their computer. They had to actually put the letters in, put the paper down, put some ink, and pull the lever down. Now we'll talk about that at some point. But again, they didn't have just press print. They had to really actually manually have someone pull a lever down and make each page of this. Thousands of Europeans read Columbus's report, and others heard the reports read aloud. Soon, everybody was talking about Columbus and his discoveries. Remember, this is a discoveries for them, but there's already people there. Some people were not sure if he had really sailed to Asia as he claimed, but they were sure he had found something new and exciting. Columbus was honored by King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. He was named Admiral of the Ocean Sea, and he hoped that he had been given money in a second voyage, so he really needed that money in ships for a voyage. So again, he needed the king and queen to give him money because he didn't have it. The second voyage was much, much bigger operation than the first voyage. Columbus had a fleet of 3 ships now, and about 100 men for his first voyage. On the second voyage, he had a fleet of 17 ships and more than 1,000 men. So imagine going from 3 ships to 17. When he was recruiting sailors for his first voyage, Columbus had a hard time finding sailors who were willing to sail west into uncharted waters. When he was recruiting men for his second voyage. He had so many eager, interested sailors that he had to turn many of them away. So again, remember guys, these guys probably heard rumors that, oh, there's gold, there's land, and they really wanted in. The ships of the second voyage left Spain in September of 1493, so 1 year after. After a stop in the Canary Islands off the coast of Africa, Columbus and his men sailed west. They sighted land in early November. Columbus explored the coast of several islands, but he was eager to get back to the fort he and his 39 of his crew members had built on Hispaniola on his first voyage. He hoped that, in his absence, the men had left behind, or the lefty men behind, would have developed peaceful trading relations with the Taino and that they would have collected a lot of gold. So he left these men there, and he was hoping that they would, be friends with the Native Americans and that they would find gold, because remember there was rumors that they were around, they saw it on their earrings. What Columbus actually found was quite different. The fort had been burned to the ground. The Spaniards he had left on the island had been killed, and there was no great hoard of collected gold. Instead of trading peacefully with the Taino of Hispaniola, the Spaniards had treated them cruelly. The Europeans had raided their villages and had taken many people as slaves. They had taken gold wherever they could find it. After a while, the Taino fought back, attacked the fort, and killed the Spaniards. Columbus decided to build another fort on Hispaniola and named it Isabella, after the Queen of Spain. He left his brother Diego in charge of it and urged him to find the gold that Columbus felt sure was on the island. Diego and his men found some gold, but not as much as Columbus had led the king and queen to think had been on the island. By 1495, Columbus's men had become very unhappy, and Columbus grew anxious. It became clear to his men that there was not as much gold as Columbus had exaggerated in his report. They felt that Columbus had lied to him. Some of them had already sailed back to Spain to complain about Columbus's exaggeration and leadership. Meanwhile, Columbus continued to look for gold, using cruel methods to get as much gold as he could. He made laws that enslaved and punished the natives if they did not collect enough gold for the Spaniards. What made the law even more cruel was the fact that Hispaniola had only a little gold. There was no way that the enslaved native people could supply the amount of gold Columbus demanded. As if that wasn't bad enough, many of the Taino became infected with diseases, to which many of the Spanish had become immune. The Taino on Hispaniola had never been exposed to types of germs the Spanish carried in their bodies. Through interacting with the Spaniards, the native came in contact with germs that their bodies could not fight. Over the next several years, many of the Taino became sick, and hundreds of thousands of them died of diseases, the most common of which was smallpox. Before Columbus's voyage, the Taino had a population of around 2 million. Between diseases and Spanish conquest during the years following the arrival of Columbus and his men, the Taino only numbered a few thousand. By 1496, it was clear that there was no more gold to be found in Hispaniola. Columbus decided to make a new law that said that the native people had to develop large farms called plantations and work as slaves for the Spanish. In just a few years, the Spanish were firmly in control of the island of Hispaniola. After that point, they began to spread out, exploring and conquering other nearby islands in the Caribbean. Many men who led these voyages of exploration and conquest were known as Conquistadors, the Spanish word for conquerors. These conquistadors were travelers, soldiers, and explorers from Spain who traveled to North, Central, and South America to look for wealth, conquering the native people and gaining control of the land. They came to the Americas to find the same thing Columbus had been looking for in unexplored parts of America: gold, spices, land, slaves, fame, and power. By the year 1542, 50 years after the first voyage of Christopher Columbus, Many Spanish conquistadors had explored and conquered most of South America, all of Central America, and a significant part of North America. So down here we have South, Central, North. So Christopher Columbus died believing he had reached the island of the East Indies in Asia, known at that time as just the Indies. When the Spanish realized this mistake, it was decided to name the area where Columbus had landed the West Indies and the Spice Islands in Asia that he had tried to reach the East Indies. So he named this over here the West Indies. What had happened in those 50 years after Columbus's voyage? First, a conquistador named Juan Ponce de Leon conquered the island of Puerto Rico to the east island of Hispaniola. At about the same time, another conquistador by the name Diego Velázquez subdued the native people on the island of Cuba, an island off the west of Hispaniola. Soon the Spanish began to extend their control beyond the island of the Caribbean Sea. They began to explore and conquer the mainland of North and South America. In 1513, Ponce de Leon explored the coast of Florida and claimed it for Spain. In the very same year, Vasco Núñez de Balboa fought his way through the jungles of Panama and became the first Spaniard to reach the Pacific Ocean. So over here, on this side. And again, you can see kind of how these people are moving. And you can see there's Ponce de Leon. He's going to Florida. He's got Florida. There's Diego Velázquez. He's going this way. All up here. You can see the different names of the people. There's Balboa. He probably named after himself. A few years later, in 1519, Hernán Cortés led a Spanish army into Mexico. He ordered that the fleet of ships be burned when he and his crew landed so that everyone would understand that there was no turning back. He marched his army inland and eventually conquered the mighty Aztec Empire and its king, Montezuma II. The conquistador Francisco Pizarro led his men deep into South America, and by 1532, he conquered the other great empire of the Americas, the Inca Empire in Peru. The defeat of this great empire was due in large part to disease. Because the natives have no immunity to the disease the Europeans brought back with them, many natives became sick and or died of these diseases after coming into contact with the Europeans. After helping Pizarro conquer the Inca Empire, the conquistador Hernando de Soto turned his attention to North America. He landed his troops on the west coast of Florida, over down here, and led them on a long trek through what is now known as the southeastern part of the United States. At about the same time, Francisco Vázquez de Coronado led his army of Spaniards north from Mexico into what is now southwestern United States, so up here, hoping to find cities of gold he heard about. So again, we've got Hernando de Soto, he's going to Florida area, and then Francisco Vázquez de Coronado, he's going in the southwest. In the following read-alouds, you will learn about the journeys of these conquistadors and other explorers and hear about their bold ideas, their voyages, their struggles in search of gold, and their interaction with Native Americans. So we'll see you guys tomorrow to learn a little bit more about these conquistadors. Have a great night.